Hello and welcome to this episode of Akrina Says. I'm your host, Eric Matei, joined today by Alex Duncan and Alex Ferm of Equitable Advisors for a fascinating conversation on a really important topic, y'all, and that is funding the buy-sell agreement for your optometry practice partnership. Now, this is a concept that is probably foreign to many of you out there, right? So be prepared. We're going to be getting into talking about some stuff that is, quite frankly, uncomfortable for people to talk about at times, right? What would happen to a business partnership in the event of death or long-term disability of one of the business partners? So I thought it'd be great to have some experts in that area, Alex and Kevin, Equitable Advisors, to join us on this episode for this deep dive into the world of buy-sell agreements and how to get them properly funded. So to kick things off, I'd like to welcome Alex and Kevin to Akrina's Access. So Alex, Kevin, welcome to the show.
All right, welcome. Thanks so much for having us, Eric. We're really excited to dive into this very important topic today. So my name is Alex Duncan. I live here in beautiful Denver, Colorado, but I serve clients really throughout the U.S. And a quick little background on myself. I spent most of my career in the optometry world. So I worked for Bausch & Lomb for 10 years as a territory manager down in Texas in the training department in the Northeast. I managed a region living in Georgia. And then my last stop there was managing national accounts with Walmart, National Vision, et cetera. From there, I moved on to Sight Sciences. Some of you probably are familiar with their product, Tear Care, which is a dry eye treatment. So I helped launch that. I was there for 4 years until a little after that company went public. And then I decided to really pursue a longtime dream of mine, which is to launch a wealth management practice. So it's actually what I intended to do when I was studying economics in school, and just got delayed by about 15 years. But about 2 years ago, I launched my practice here in alliance with Equitable Advisors. And we really practice holistic financial planning, which is not just a buzzword. What that means is we focus not just on growing assets, but also, very importantly, covering risks. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. We cover risks to make sure that you are protected, that you're not overexposed to any particular scenario that could happen to you personally, or that could happen to your business. So like I said, I transitioned in this business 2 years ago. My partner, Kevin Ferm, has actually been in this business for 20 years. So he has a tremendous amount of experience, and he's about 100 feet down the hallway from me, but want to introduce Kevin to the group as well.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.
Absolutely.
Eric, thanks for having us on. Like Alex said, we're Equitable Advisors. Hard to believe we're coming up on 20 years here in the next couple months. And so my whole career has been working with individuals, families, and most excitingly, businesses and business owners, really helping to implement tax-efficient strategies for building and protecting wealth. And certainly one of the caveats of today's conversation is how we help business owners in the medical space and other industries, look at the three areas that, they need to consider when they get into practice for themselves away from corporate America. Is, how do they offer employees attractive benefit packages? How do the business owners, partnership groups, clear through the tunnel vision of looking at owning business, but also managing a personal financial plan, and then ultimately passing the baton. So today's topic of buy-sell planning, funding is one of those areas where you can really cover risks, but also plan proactively for, what could be deemed as undesirable events in the future. So the continuity and the transition of the business continues in a smooth fashion. So that's a little bit insight into my history and experience in this space. So
Fantastic. Yeah, Alex, Kevin, again, thank you all so much for coming on, and let's go ahead and jump right into it, right? And maybe let's take it from the top, right? Let's start by just defining what exactly is a buy-sell agreement.
Yeah, great question. You hear the phrase a lot, and and I think in the the concept of a business group ownership, whether it's partnership or multiple owner scenario, is a buy-sell agreement, typically found through an operating agreement, business formation, is a legally binding contract where you're going to outline the procedures and protocol, the transfer of ownership, due to triggering events. These triggering events, we typically refer to them as the 3Ds in retirement. You'll find death, disability, potentially divorce. Then ultimately on an exciting front was retirement, is how do you transition in a buy-sell agreement. So the concept is you want to have, a blueprint for what is to happen. How does this transition go if a triggering event occurs? And then also the funding. You want to not just have words on paper that says, here's our desires, but you got to have some mechanism for funding a transition so that there's maybe a surviving spouse and a surviving business partner that want to make each other whole financially. So it's the design and implementation of a plan, really ultimately for business continuity, business continuation.
Yeah. And look, you kicked it off there, Kevin, by mentioning the triggering events as the 3Ds. And let's face it, it's something, it's not fun to talk about. Death, disability, divorce. But realizing that in the context of that, if you're in a business partnership, it's vitally important that this stuff is to be addressed, right? Not only from that legal side and but also being sure that everything's properly documented in all of the articles of incorporation, the operating agreement, et cetera, but also that the mechanisms are in place to actually fund it, right? So really, really fascinating world that gets into a lot of, I suppose, interesting moving parts. So Kevin now explore it a little bit deeper. What is the significance of the buy-sell for a modern optometry partnership?
Yeah. So I'll say everyone on this call, right? Everyone who's in business, you will exit your business eventually. No one runs their business in perpetuity, right? Now, hopefully that is a planned exit and you retire on your terms. Sometimes that is an unplanned exit, right? So just to illustrate this a little bit, let's say you're in partnership with another optometrist. And let's just say, for simplicity's sake, that this is a even 50-50 partnership. And on the way to work, one day, your partner gets in a fatal car accident. If you have a properly structured and funded buy-sell agreement, what this really allows you to do is to continue operating and running the business, as well as make sure your deceased partner's family is taken care of financially. Because without a properly structured and funded buy-sell agreement, in that case, guess what? You now have a new business partner. That new business partner is likely your former partner's spouse. It could even be their child, depending on how things are drawn up, right? Most likely, that is not someone that you necessarily want to be in business in. They're not equipped to run an optometry practice with you, right? And if it's a minor, that's a whole other host of problems from a legality standpoint.
Sure.
So, this is where, we're preparing for something that we certainly don't expect to happen in that case, but we want to make sure that your risks are covered so everyone gets really what they need, and you're not having a major disruption to your business by introducing a new partner, and now you're trying to agree on what the value of the business is, right, after the fact. That's not the spot that you want to be in. But also, buy-sell agreements, and a lot of people don't think of them in this way, they can be structured for planned exits as well. So if you have a situation where there is a senior partner and a junior partner, and the senior partner is planning to retire in a few years or so, there are ways that you can creatively structure and fund a buy-sell that'll actually help the junior partner with liquidity to make the senior partner whole in retirement. So these are all going to be very unique to your practice, to your partnership structure. But it is such a critical piece. And there's multiple components of a buy-sell agreement. One thing I really want to make sure people understand, the buy-sell is going to be tied to a valuation of the business, right? And that is not a one and done scenario. Your business is going to grow over the time. So that valuation will need to be updated over time. And that's one area, as me and Kevin have gotten more familiar with Acrinos and everything that they offer, I know they do a tremendous job of helping you value your business in a very accurate way, which is very critical to this kind of an agreement.
Yeah, so many moving parts there. And I think the really important to first and foremost realize the difference between the planned exit and the unplanned exit, right?
Yeah.
Because it is like it's no one knows when this stuff is going to happen, right? That death, that long-term disability, the divorce, right? As Kevin mentioned earlier, the 3Ds, the triggering events, right? Never fun to talk about, but it's important to realize how that buy-sell agreement is going to protect us and ensure the future of the business and even the unplanned exit. But also it's fascinating, you mentioned that there are ways how there are funding mechanisms, buy-sell funding mechanisms that can also support a planned exit. Now, obviously, Absolutely. That then opens a whole can of worms, which we probably won't get into all those details in this episode of Access, but definitely for our viewers out there that are in partnership or will perhaps find themselves in partnership here in the near future, to consider there are a variety of ways in setting up the funding mechanisms that it can also be used as part of some more strategic wealth planning and such. So really, really fascinating stuff. I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into some of these concepts as well and get some thoughts on how partnerships and buy-sells impact various aspects of the practice.
Yeah, I can take that one. So really, I guess the better question is what areas does it not impact, right? Because if you have one of these triggering events and we run into a situation where there is not a properly structured buy-sell, or let's say you drafted the buy-sell 10 years ago and your business has grown 4 or 5x since then, right? The buy-sell is not going to be worth much if it's not based on a fair valuation. So you think about all the areas where if you are reliant on a partner and that partner is no longer there, the areas that can disrupt. I mean, you're talking about your patient experience, right? You're talking about cash flow, the overall operation of the practice. If it's too disruptive, you could potentially have, staff leave because it's too disruptive and not a good place to work anymore, which then affects the reputation of the business as well. So it really affects everything. And I'm not trying to be, alarmist here or strike fear in anyone, but it is such a critical aspect of protection for your business that it affects absolutely everything. And one thing to think about, so for some of you, you may have taken out a loan to start your business or to buy into a partnership. Most likely, the bank asked you to have some kind of a buy-sell in place to secure that loan. So why are they doing it? It's very similar to if you're getting a mortgage on a house, the bank's going to require for you to have insurance, homeowners insurance on the house, right? Because they don't want to subject themselves to that kind of risk. If they don't want to subject themselves to that kind of risk, it's something you should pay attention to too. You don't want to be overexposed to that level of risk. And it's something that you absolutely want to be prepared for. So this is all about business continuation. It's all about making sure the business is protected so your patients can be taken care of, so your employees can be taken care of, and the business can continue to run and give everyone the care that they expect and deserve from your practice.
I want to pick up on something you said there that's really, I think, really important to note, Alex, and that is it's all about business continuation, right? And something you mentioned also regarding how the partnership and buy-sell impacts all facets of the business. The fact is, and to our listeners out there, so if you are in partnership, right, then you know that if all of a sudden next week one of you was not in clinic for the week seeing patients, what would happen to cash flows? And in the event of that reduction in cash flows, how liquid is the company to maintain, right? So as we're talking about this from a buy-sell standpoint, where many of us immediately think about a death or a long-term disability that we'd be buying out of the business, we also need to think of just simply having the liquid funds available to hire a doctor to come in and see those patients, right? I mean, if we're talking about for those of you out there that are in a 2-doctor practice, y'all are probably your production's hovering anywhere from say, 1.5 to say 2.5. Well, in the event one of you were out of the picture, wow, there's no way that the survivor could be seen to that level of production was maintained. So again, I wanted to point out that, and Alex, I think that's something, obviously, Alex, Kevin, that in itself, business continuation, even in the short term, is a whole other kettle of fish to entertain. But it really all ties back to the integrity of the business and protecting those cash flows and making those funds available. So as we dig a little deeper then into this, and maybe kind of look at this through the lens of the business life cycle, right? So maybe if you guys can maybe speak a little bit to these key areas of consideration for partnership and buy, sell at different phases of life cycle, right? Early stage, where perhaps one of the partners has significant debt. Perhaps these growth stages where a lot of the debt is paid down, but we're presumably in the peak earnings year. Maybe also regarding some of the maturing stages as one of the partners may be approaching retirement.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. I'll chime in on that. I think, that you could get really granular on each one. And that's, especially in the early stages of starting the practice, whether you're taking over or starting, from the ground up. The early stages, it's really all about identifying the financial risks, right? The risks of ownership. And it also pairs with, you mentioned debt and liability, right? What are the ownership liabilities, either, financially or, obligations to the bank. So I think in the early stages, the key is to identify the risks. And namely, you're going to be identifying that through operating agreements, working closely with CPAs and attorneys to get that mapped out. As that business grows, the good change comes as revenue increases and some expenses diminish, create more profit. Tendencies are to have more flexibility to implement these plans through those growth stages. But I would also attest to the importance of that valuation, at least on a a biannual basis, as the trajectory is taking off, is you need to go back to the valuation and looking at the risks that were assessed in the early stages, to making sure that you have the key players identified and what are the funding mechanisms at this point to implement the strategy in the need of a triggering event. And then Alex had mentioned earlier, as we approach maturity, you don't want to wait too long, but you want to have a plan that develops as the growth stage matures, that ultimately, there's going to be some retirement or liquidity event at the end of the road, right? As we're talking through all of this, I always think about the phrase we use with clients all the time is, plan for the best, prepare for the worst, right? That's kind of financial planning 101 is you want to have a plan for the best outcome, but be prepared and have a plan in place for when something unexpected happens. So those maturity phases, you might be looking at buy-sell arrangements in terms of what are the transition opportunities through, retained equity in the various funding mechanisms that can help a junior partner buy out a senior partner, so to speak. And, that way it can be a self-completing plan. So the buy-sell plan definitely integrates, like Alex said, with all facets of the business. And, we work closely in the concept of qualified retirement plans, health, disability, and life insurance plans. But it is, to your point, something that needs to be addressed through all cycles of the business, maturity, and reviewed. I think that's the key too, is reviewed and reevaluated over time.
Yeah. And you hit on so many key things, Kevin. I think most notably is plan for the best, but prepare for the worst, right? And that's really that's a tremendous recipe for success as it pertains to not only financial planning and the protection side of things, but also just in running and growing the business, right?
Right.
But I think it's also really important of note what you mentioned regarding the changing face of the practice over time, right? So if we think about kind of the three phases of a partnership, from that early stage of partnership, where you're going to have a new partner that has a significant amount of debt, right? So we need to assess things, value the practice, cash flows there, what it means to each party. But then also realizing that in time, that's going to change, right? We're going to hit some peak partnership earnings years whereby we find that debt paid off, and perhaps then there's an opportunity to leverage. I know each of you are mentioning some of these ways you can fund these mechanisms and actually have some equity in those funding mechanisms, right? So perhaps it's in those peak earnings years that we can really stock some tax qualified dollars away in some of these mechanisms. And then last but certainly not least, the mature phase of the partnership, which, perhaps would also be the early stage for the next partner, right? Particularly when we look at these, it's fascinating to see this proliferation of these legacy practices. Alex, Kevin, we've seen private equity come into the space here for about the last decade, and it seems to have been what everybody wanted to be a part of there for a few years. I think the industry and doctors are kind of stepping back and thinking, wow, did I really grow this business to sell to some corporation? No. I mean, many doctors grew these to impact their community, to empower themselves and their patients in their community, and they want to transition that legacy to the next generation of independent owners. So it's fascinating, again, to see how buy-sell funding mechanisms can really serve these partnerships and empower doctors at all of these phases. As we're kind of closing things in here, kind of wrapping things up, again, y'all, really fascinating episode here. We're talking about this whole world of funding buy-sell agreements for practice partnerships here with Alex Duncan and Kevin Ferm of Equitable Advisors. But what would you say, just as we kind of wrap this up before the send-off, what are some of the best practices out there? Partnership and buy-sell best practices for the modern practice. Some key takeaways for our viewers.
Yeah, I think, several bullet points come to mind, but the first one, I think in any successful business in any industry or nature, I mean, you're going to have a team of advisors that are pretty constantly looking at the performance of the business and looking to get better, right? And some of these partnerships I mentioned, great CPA and accounting firms, having attorneys to help with the legal and risk elements there, consultants such as yourself. And where we come in as financial advisors, really to help implement some of the solutions that are drafted through these documents, through tax planning and through the legal work. So I think partnerships with these advisors is huge. And like you said, as the face of the business changes over time, you need to evolve to meet those needs. Planning by design and planning by default are a couple different things. And Alex had mentioned the planned versus unplanned exit. There is a document in the operating agreement that says our buy-sell wishes is one thing. And then the phrase we use or hear a lot is your buy-sell agreement funded? Would be the second thing, meaning is there a mechanism in place that would provide liquidity or provide stability to carry out the wishes drafted in that buy-sell agreement? And so I'll leave you with the thought of there's 5 typical ways people fund, and this has to be designed and drafted specifically to each business. But the unplanned, there's some bullet points there that typically cash. Okay, there's a surviving business owner situation. We need to make the surviving spouse whole. Is there cash available? Do I have immediate access to cash? Yes, maybe, no, more likely. If not, do I have access to loans? Do I want to take out loans, immediate loans that might not be favorable interest rates or terms with the bank to buy out that partner? Now I have a bank partnership instead of a surviving spouse partnership. In the planning side of things, you might have a sinking fund, more or less, hey, let's start creating some cash within the business, could be retained earnings or equity that is earmarked for this undesirable event, right? So there's not an immediate liquidity call or a call to the bank for a loan. Could be some arrangement for an installment sale with the estate of the deceased partner. And ultimately, looking in the most, potentially favorable scenario is how to leverage insurance or life insurance specifically to be an investment that can, provide instant liquidity on a tax favorable basis, and it could potentially have multiple functions using one certain program for that. So again, it's different for every business, but again, what is the plan and how are you funding it is the beginning of the process there.
Yeah, really, really powerful stuff, y'all. I mean, truly. And if we kind of can think this through the lens of no matter which aspect of the partnership someone is involved in, right? Whether you're the junior partner and you just bought in even a portion of the business, or whether you're the established legacy business owner taking on the partner, even if you're only giving them a small slice of the business from the get-go, to be sure that the mechanisms are in place, not only that everything is legally documented, right? Because I think it's, Kevin, I do want to point out and really stress the importance to our listeners out there, the importance of working with a team, right? Realizing that it is going to take a team of experts to be sure that all is fully optimized for your practice. And that team is far more than just an attorney to make things legal, right? But you really need to have that team effort, collaboration across your attorney, with your CPA, with your financial advisors, with your business consultants, right? To be sure that all the stuff is really set up to optimize the practice around what you all want. And I think that's arguably the best takeaway from this, right? And I know you guys see it in the work you all do with your clients, Alex and Kevin. Now is the time when all parties can come to the table and truly express what they would like to see in the event of death, disability, or divorce, right? Yeah. Be proactive about it. Plan for these scenarios. It's also fascinating to see all the different ways it can be done, right? I mean, sure, there are ways to self-fund these things. I think in this day and age of business, with so much movement in business, it's difficult to allocate that much cash on the sideline to simply fund a what-if scenario, and there's you guys bring up a great point also as far as working with the banks. Do we want to be in a pinch having to commit to a loan, even if the rates perhaps are not that favorable? And certainly the degree to which life insurance and different vehicles of that nature can perhaps position partners to empower themselves to be more proactive in that planning. Through really fascinating stuff, gentlemen. Wow. What an episode. This has been a really great, deeply insightful episode as we've been talking about funding buy-sell agreements for the modern practice partnership with Alex Duncan and Kevin Ferm from Equitable Advisors. I suppose before we go, if you guys can maybe share how folks can get in touch with you. Alex?
Absolutely. Yeah. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can help. So you can contact me. Phone number is 303-927-8624. You can see that up on the screen, as well as my email, alex.duncan@equitable.com. And also, if you're driving or not able to write that down, Eric can always connect you with me as well. But we've really enjoyed participating in this. And, one thing I want to say, I spent my whole career in optometry. I'm very passionate about it. I want to see all of you thrive, and all of you also, cover your six when it comes to your business and make sure you're protected. So any way that we can help with that, we'd be happy to.
Well, Alex, Kevin, man, thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of Acrinos Access. And we're going to have to do this again. We're going to have to do this again down the line and maybe get into some more of the weeds on some of this stuff, because we kept this very high level. And, this whole world of partnerships and buy-sell agreements and how to fund these buy-sell agreements, just tremendous area for any phases of the practice. So if y'all would like to connect with Alex, Kevin at Equitable Advisor, you can reach out to Alex at alex.duncan@equitable.com, and his phone number 303-927-8624. And hey, if you're looking to make it happen in your practice, whether that's starting your very first private practice or really maximizing the potential of your peak earnings years and planning for that exit, head on over to acrinos.com. We got some amazing ways we can help you bring that vision to reality. So Alex, Kevin, thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.